75th Rangers. You were with Colonel Mercer's unit in Kandahar. Sergeant Rees asked, his professional demeanor momentarily giving way to genuine respect. For the second tour, James confirmed, a tacit understanding passing between the two veterans. First tour was with 10th Mountain Division. Patricia attempted to seize back control of the situation, her voice rising over the rain. This is all very touching, but these animals threatened us. They were going to attack. Officer Martinez, who had been methodically documenting the scene with her body camera, glanced at the dogs. Both Rex and Shadow remained seated in perfect, disciplined form, despite the downpour, water running off their fur in rivulets. "Ma'am, those animals haven't moved," she observed coolly. "And you've been recorded on private property without permission after a previous warning." "We have documentation," Deborah began, gesturing to the now-soaked papers in her leather portfolio. Sergeant Reeds cut her off. "Documentation that would show what exactly?" "That you believe this property falls under HOA jurisdiction. The county records office says otherwise." "You don't understand," Patricia insisted, switching tactics with practiced ease. "Mr. Wilson's activities here constitute a public nuisance. These animals are certified service animals," James interjected quietly. From his pocket, he produced a weatherproof wallet containing 3 laminated cards. "Rex and Shadow are registered support animals for veterans with PTSD. Una, who's currently in the house, is a certified therapy dog who visits the children's ward at Memorial Hospital every other Tuesday." The shock on Patricia's face would have been comical in other circumstances. "That's impossible," she stammered. "These are military attack dogs. These are highly trained service animals." Sergeant Rees corrected her firmly. "And I've seen enough military working dogs to know these two are displaying exceptional discipline, especially considering 3 strangers trespassed on their territory." Collins, still pressed against the fence, finally found his voice. "Officers, I was led to believe this property was being legally incorporated into the Meadowbrook development. I had no intention of trespassing." "And you are?" Officer Martinez asked. "Jeffrey Collins, with Collins and Whitman Law." Martinez made a note. "Mr. Collins, you may want to review the property records before any further involvement with this situation." Patricia's expression hardened as she realized her position was deteriorating rapidly. "We'll be filing a complaint with your supervisor, officer. The Meadowbrook HOA has significant influence with the county council, and they'll be very interested to hear how the sheriff's department is handling this matter." Sergeant Rees' face remained impassive, but the subtle shift in his stance spoke volumes to James. The sergeant was an old hand at dealing with entitled threats. "Ma'am, you're welcome to contact Sheriff Davenport directly," Reeves replied, his tone professionally neutral. "In the meantime, Officer Martinez and I will be issuing trespassing citations as required by law. This is your second documented offense on this property." "This is absurd," Deborah exclaimed, mascara running down her cheeks in the rain. "We were simply performing our duties as HOA representatives." "Your HOA has no jurisdiction here," Martinez stated firmly, pulling out her citation pad despite the rain. "And even if it did, that wouldn't grant you the right to enter private property without permission." Patricia's gaze shifted calculatingly between the officers, James, and the dogs. James recognized the look. She was reassessing, searching for leverage. "I hope you realize," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential tone meant for the officers, "that Mr. Wilson's military background makes him potentially unstable. Those animals aren't ordinary pets. They're trained to attack. We've received complaints from several neighbors about aggressive incidents." The accusation hung in the rain-heavy air for a moment. James felt a familiar burning sensation in his chest, the same one he'd felt when false intelligence had put his unit in danger overseas. But his expression remained neutral, years of discipline holding firm. As James stood before the gathered Meadowbrook residents with Luna calmly at his side, he noticed a mix of curiosity and respect in their expressions. Gone was the suspicion he'd grown accustomed to. The change was palpable. "The most important thing to understand about dogs," he continued, gesturing to where Luna sat attentively at his side, "is that they mirror your energy. They don't respond to what you say, they respond to what you mean. To demonstrate, he gave Luna a hand signal. The shepherd immediately moved to a training mat and assumed a perfect downstay position, her eyes never leaving James. Communication, consistency, and respect, James repeated. Your dog needs all three from you, consistently. From the back of the gathered crowd, a young girl raised her hand tentatively. She couldn't have been more than 10, with braces and pigtails. Mr. Wilson, is it true your dogs saved soldiers' lives? The directness of the question caught him off guard. James hesitated, memories flooding back, the scorching Afghan sun, the weight of tactical gear, the moment Rex had alerted to the hidden IED that would have killed their entire unit. Yes, he answered simply. Many times. The girl nodded solemnly. My uncle was a Marine. He said military dogs are heroes too. They absolutely are, James agreed, something tight loosening in his chest. This wasn't the response he'd expected when Marina Patel had first approached him about the community training sessions. After the session ended, Marina approached him with a steaming cup of coffee. The former judge had proven to be the antithesis of Patricia, straightforward, ethical, and genuinely concerned with building community rather than controlling it. That went well, she observed, handing him the cup. I've had 15 people ask if you consider making this a regular event. James watched as the last participants left, his 3 shepherds now lounging in the shade nearby, accepting occasional pats from passing children with dignified patience. I'll think about it, he replied, surprised to find he meant it. Marina nodded toward the far side of the park, where Patricia's white Mercedes was parked. She sat inside, watching the dispersing crowd with an unreadable expression. The board voted unanimously to terminate her husband's company's landscaping contract. Marina mentioned casually, apparently, they've been overcharging by nearly 40% compared to market rates. The new contractor starts next week. James sipped his coffee. I heard Gerald's development company is facing an audit. Yes, the county commissioner was particularly interested in certain rezoning applications that contained forged signatures, Marina replied, her former judge's poker face firmly in place. Completely unrelated to any of this, of course. Of course, James agreed. As they spoke, Deborah emerged from a nearby bakery, spotted them, and promptly turned around to walk in the opposite direction. James couldn't help but notice she was carrying paperwork with a real estate company's logo. She's listing her house? Marina confirmed, following his gaze. Moving to Palm Springs, apparently. Her husband is staying here. Something about irreconcilable differences. The community had changed remarkably in the weeks following what residents now simply called the incident. Documents discovered in the HOA office had revealed years of preferential treatment, selective enforcement, and financial arrangements that bordered on fraudulent. The new board, led by Marina, had implemented transparency measures that had transformed the atmosphere in Meadowbrook. You know, James said thoughtfully, watching a shadow playfully nudged a tennis ball toward a giggling toddler under the watchful eyes of both sets of parents. I never wanted to be part of a community. After my last tour, I just wanted peace and quiet. Marina nodded. And now? James considered the question as he watched Luna gently accept a treat from Mrs. Abernathy, whose memorial garden had been officially designated as a community landmark by the new board. Now I think I might have found something better, he admitted. Something worth protecting. Call them off, Patricia demanded, her voice rising to a pitch that cut through the rainfall. Call your dogs off right now. James remained motionless, rain streaming down his face. They haven't moved toward you. They're maintaining a perimeter. The suited man, who James now recognized as Jeffrey Collins, a local attorney known for representing developers, had pressed himself against the fence. His expensive leather shoes were sinking into the mud, ruining what James estimated to be at least $400 worth of Italian craftsmanship. Patricia, Collins hissed, you told me this property was being incorporated into the development. You said the owner had agreed in principle. James raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting the revelation hang in the rain-soaked air. So that was the play. They were already selling his land to investors without his knowledge or consent. Deborah finally managed to unlock her phone with trembling fingers. I'm calling animal control and the sheriff. These animals are dangerous and threatening us. On my property. Where you're trespassing? James replied, his voice deceptively gentle. After I specifically warned you to stay off my land just last week, with your actions recorded from multiple angles? As if to punctuate his point, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Shadow's ears twitched at the sound, but the shepherd maintained his position perfectly, rain beading on his coal-black coat. The law is clear about trespassing and self-defense, James continued. My dogs are trained to contain threats, not attack without command. Unlike some people I know, they follow the rules. Rex had positioned himself at precisely the optimal angle to prevent movement toward the house, a textbook tactical formation that had saved James's life more than once in combat zones. The dog's eyes never left Patricia, having correctly identified her as the primary instigator. You don't understand, Patricia said, attempting to regain her composure despite the mud now soaking through her designer pants. The expansion has already been approved by the County Planning Commission. Your property has been rezoned for residential development. James allowed himself a small smile. That's interesting, because I spoke with Commissioner Davis yesterday. There's no rezoning application for this parcel. There can't be without my signature, which I haven't provided. Collins shot Patricia a look of pure alarm. You said this was settled. His professional demeanor cracked as he realized the precariousness of his position, legally and literally. It will be settled, Patricia insisted, though her voice had lost its certainty. Everyone has a price. Not everyone, James replied. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, and Patricia's expression shifted from fear to calculation. James had seen that look before, the moment when a cornered opponent decided to change tactics. You know, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level despite the rain and distance between them. My husband has considerable influence with the VA hospital board. I understand you still receive medical treatment there for your incidents. The implication was clear, a threat to interfere with his PTSD treatment and disability benefits. James felt a familiar coldness settle into his chest, the same detached focus that had kept him alive during ambushes and firefights. The dogs sensed the shift in his energy instantly. Without any visible command, both Rex and Shadow lowered their stance slightly, their muscles coiling with new tension. They made no sound, but their intent was unmistakable to anyone who understood canine body language. Collins saw it immediately. Patricia, stop talking, he warned, genuine fear breaking through his professional veneer. These aren't pets. Look at their eyes. James remained utterly still, the rain plastering his shirt to the combat scars across his torso. Only someone who knew him well would have noticed the slight tightening around his eyes, the only external sign of the calculations happening behind them. James tucked the crumpled notice into his pocket and whistled a different pattern. The three shepherds immediately relaxed, falling back into their normal routines. Una trotting to her favorite sunspot by the eastern fence, Rex resuming his vigilant patrol of the perimeter, and Shadow padding silently behind James as he walked toward his workshop. Inside the converted barn that now served as both garage and training facility, James pinned the HOA notice to a corkboard already dotted with similar papers. 12 violations in 8 weeks, each more ridiculous than the last. His fence was unnecessarily militaristic. His kennels were visually disruptive to community aesthetic. Even the American flag he'd flown since his return from service had been deemed oversized and improperly displayed, despite being exactly to code specifications for residential properties. This isn't about regulations, James murmured to Shadow, who sat attentively beside him. This is about control. His phone buzzed. A text from Mike Sanderson, a county clerk who'd served with James's brother in the National Guard. Asterisk, they've been asking about your property lines again. Sent them the same survey data for the 3rd time. Thought you should know, asterisk. James sighed and ran a hand through his close-cropped hair, still maintained at military length out of habit rather than requirement. He'd purposely chosen this property for its location, close enough to conveniences, but just outside the reach of Meadowbrook's notorious HOA. The previous owner had specifically sold to James after learning of his service, even accepting a slightly lower offer to ensure the land went to a veteran rather than the development company that had been eyeing it for expansion. That was the real issue. His 5 acres stood in the way of Meadowbrook's planned Phase 3, a fact he'd discovered through public records requests after the second violation notice arrived. Patricia's husband, an ambitious property developer with political aspirations, had already drawn up plans that conveniently incorporated James's land into their luxury housing vision. Shadow's ears suddenly pricked forward, seconds before James heard the car approaching, the distinctive purr of a luxury engine crawling along his gravel driveway. He moved to the small window, recognizing the white Mercedes SUV with the PTRAMG vanity plate. Patricia didn't bother exiting her vehicle. She simply rolled down her window and held out another envelope, her expression a mask of professional displeasure when James emerged from the workshop. "Mr. Wilson, the board has unanimously voted to escalate your violations to our legal team," she announced, as though reading from an internal script. "We're prepared to pursue all available remedies, including court-ordered compliance." James approached the vehicle calmly, noting how Patricia's finger hovered near the window control, ready to close it if he came too close. She flinched slightly when Shadow appeared silently at his side. "Is your animal restrained?" she demanded, her voice rising half an octave. "Shadow is under voice control," James replied evenly, making no move to take the envelope. "And this is private property outside Meadowbrook Estate's jurisdiction. I've confirmed this with the county 3 times now." Patricia's professionally maintained smile tightened. "Community standards don't end at arbitrary lines on a map, Mr. Wilson. Your compound is visible from association properties and affects our collective home values. Is that what this is about? Or is it about your husband's Phase 3 expansion plans?" The slight widening of her eyes confirmed his suspicion. "I don't know what you're talking about," she recovered quickly. "But I suggest you review these documents carefully. The association is prepared to be quite persistent in this matter." She tossed the envelope onto his gravel drive, rolled up her window, and executed a 3-point turn, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. James didn't immediately pick up the envelope. Instead, he watched the Mercedes disappear down the rural road, a sense of weariness settling over him. He'd survived firefights and AED-laden roads in war zones, only to come home and face a different kind of battle, one fought with paperwork, ordinances, and suburban politics. The tension in James's backyard hung heavy as afternoon clouds gathered overhead. The landscaper, Carl, apparently, shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting between James and the 2 HOA representatives. "You're on camera," James repeated calmly, his phone displaying the security feed. "Breaking and entering is a felony in this state." Patricia recovered her composure with remarkable speed, years of social conditioning kicking in, as she straightened her designer jacket. "We didn't break anything. Your gate was unlocked." "It wasn't," James replied. "And unauthorized entry is still trespassing, whether the door is locked or not." Deborah stepped forward, her pearl necklace catching the light as she attempted to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Wilson, you need to understand that the board has a responsibility to all Meadowbrook residents. She gestured vaguely at his property. "Compound is visible from at least 7 properties in our development. The impact on home values is not my concern," James finished for her. "Those 7 homeowners bought properties bordering land that isn't under HOA jurisdiction. That was their choice." Carl suddenly spoke up, surprising everyone. "He's right, Mrs. Langley. I told you that the property line—" "That's enough, Carl," Patricia snapped, cutting him off with a razor-sharp glare. She turned back to James with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot. The association is simply trying to maintain the standards that all residents agree to when purchasing in Meadowbrook." "I didn't purchase in Meadowbrook," James pointed out, "and I didn't agree to your standards." From one of the kennels, Rex let out a low warning growl, sensing the tension in his handler's voice. All 3 trespassers tensed visibly. "Are those animals secure?" Deborah demanded, her hand clutching her designer purse tighter. James ignored the question. You have exactly 2 minutes to leave my property before I call the sheriff. This is your only warning. Patricia's facade cracked slightly. You don't seem to understand your situation, Mr. Wilson. The board has resources you can't imagine. My husband is Gerald Langley of Langley Development. James finished for her. I know exactly who he is, and exactly what Phase 3 of Meadowbrook Estates looks like on paper, including the planned model homes that would sit right where we're standing. This revelation clearly caught her off guard. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. You can tell Gerald that this property isn't for sale, James continued. Not to him, not to the HOA, not to anyone. I've already placed it in a veterans land trust that prohibits development for 50 years, even after my death. This was a bluff. He'd only begun the paperwork last week after discovering their development plans. But Patricia's face confirmed he'd hit the mark. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving blotchy patches beneath her makeup. 1 minute remaining, James said, glancing at his watch. Carl broke first, backing away toward the gate. I'm sorry, sir. I just measured things. I didn't know. It's fine, James assured him. Just leave now. Deborah found her voice again, though it had lost its authoritative edge. This isn't over. The association has legal options to deal with properties within its jurisdiction, James finished. Which this isn't. 45 seconds. Patricia attempted one final power play, stepping closer to James rather than retreating. Those animals, she hissed, nodding toward the kennels. Military dogs are classified differently under county ordinance. I wonder what would happen if animal control received anonymous reports of aggressive behavior, multiple reports. The threat hung in the air between them. James didn't respond immediately, his expression unreadable. The dogs, sensing something significant, had gone completely silent, their training kicking in as they waited for comments. 30 seconds, James finally said, his voice dropping to a quiet register that somehow carried more weight than if he'd shouted. And Mrs. Langley, if anything happens to my dogs, there won't be an HOA regulation in existence that will protect you from the legal consequences. For the first time, Patricia seemed to truly see the man standing before her, not just an obstacle to development plans, but someone who had faced genuinely dangerous situations and emerged intact. Someone who understood real threats versus suburban power plays. Without another word, she turned and walked briskly toward the gate, Deborah hurrying after her, leaving Carl to trail behind apologetically.